Google is still making a lot of money. Its parent company, Alphabet, reported more than $90 billion in revenue for the first quarter. That's up 12% compared to last year. Its CEO, Sundar Pichai, said that their AI strategy was to thank. But the elephant in the room at the earnings call was the possibility that U.S. Justice might order the company be broken up. Our technology editor, Peter O'Brien, joins us on set for more. Hi, Peter. So the last couple of weeks then have been significant for big tech as far as antitrust goes.
They have, and not just in the US, but over here in the EU, we saw the first fines doled out under the landmark competition law, the Digital Markets Act, and that included 500 million euros for Apple for anti-competitive App Store design. Stateside, though, that's where some of the biggest decisions are being made. The Justice Department has been attacking Google on two fronts, as you can see here. Last week, a federal judge in Virginia found that Google illegally dominated markets for online advertising through its ad manager and ad exchange. A trial on potential remedies, which could include breaking up the company, is set to begin in September. But focus now is on a court in Washington, D.C., which has already decided last year that Google does constitute an illegal monopoly over online search. And the remedy phase is already underway. Again, government lawyers are arguing for Google to be broken up, notably for the Chrome browser to be lopped off. And we can speak now, hopefully, to John Newman, an antitrust professor at the University of Miami Law School, who is at the Federal Trade Commission and also previously at the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your patience.
Thanks for having me.
So the Washington case, then, is the furthest along. What's happening today? What happens next?
So right now, we're trying to decide what's to be done about Google's illegal now monopoly. So the judge in the U.S. has already decided Google's engaged in some illegal monopolistic behavior. This case focuses mostly on Google's search engine, the part of Google's business that we all are more familiar with. And right now, there's a real difference between what the government is asking this court to do and what Google wants the court to do. Maybe unsurprising, Google doesn't want much to happen. The government's asking for a lot.
So is this, as I've seen it described, the antitrust trial of the century?
I think so far it is. It's a young century still, right? And there are some other interesting cases rattling around, including another one involving Google here in the US. But I think thus far, this is the antitrust trial of the century. It was the first in the US, the first big case against a big tech company. It's the first big case where a judge found Google violated the law in a U.S. case, at least. And it's the first case that involves a product that all of us use pretty much every day, right? Search in the U.S. is dominated by Google. That's true for most of the world. So it's a case that touches each and every one of us. I think all that together makes this, the trial of the century.
And the DOJ then, as we know, is arguing for the sale of the Chrome browser, but also the option to force the sale of the Android mobile system as well. Why these measures in particular?
Well, these are both important distribution channels, is how this judge has spoken about them in the previous decision. They're ways that if you're a search engine, you can get your product in front of a user, right? And that's essential if you want to gain scale and gain market share as a search engine. So if we're ever going to have hope of a world where there are really meaningful competitors to Google in search, not just Bing and DuckDuckGo, but new entrants, new companies competing in search, they're going to have to be able to get in front of users. And right now, Google is using Chrome and its control over Android to basically make Google the default option for just about every user of those important products. So the government's idea is if Google doesn't control Chrome and maybe doesn't control Android, that's going to open up more avenues for new entrants, new companies to launch new search engines and maybe even next generation tools like query-based artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. But all that requires getting in front of consumers. That's why this is part of the package.
Let's talk about AI then. When this was filed in 2020, it wasn't so much as a footnote, but now there are worries that Google, as you say, is leveraging its search dominance to dominate AI. What's the evidence for this?
Well, we've heard from some AI companies, actually, that have testified in court that they feel like they don't have an open playing field. They feel like Google is controlling many of the ways that they'd like to get in front of consumers. And we've already seen, I think, some troubling signs that Google, through investments and partnerships and that sort of thing, it's kind of trying not to stop the future of AI, but Google's trying to control the future of AI. And we've also heard from some AI startups that they would like it if Chrome were an open option for them. So I think all of this is coming together to make AI a bigger piece of this case than it was, as you said at the start.
And another big antitrust trial that began last week over your side of the Atlantic is the FTC's challenge of Meta's acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp, which you oversaw while you were there. I've seen in the media that this will be tough for the FTC because Meta doesn't control as much of the social media landscape in the same way as, for instance, Google dominates search or ads. What chances are you giving it?
Well, any good antitrust litigator would never give you any numerical odds, but I think the FTC has a pretty good chance here. To understand why, it requires understanding how markets work in an antitrust or anti-monopoly sense. So it may be true that there's a lot of companies in the big social media space, right? Maybe Twitter is in there, X Corp, LinkedIn, et cetera. But in the narrower space where Meta's closest competitors exist, personal social networking, there really aren't that many players, and Instagram and Facebook are the biggest ones by far. And so the FTC is going to try to convince a judge that's actually a valid market, a valid way to think about things. And I think they have a pretty good chance of doing so using, Meta's own internal documents, that sort of thing.
John Newman from the University of Miami Law School, thanks very much for speaking to France 24.